Some of Donald Trump's cabinet choices will come under close scrutiny later. Retired General James Mad Dog Mattis needs a special waiver from Congress to become Defence Secretary. The President-elect's controversial pick for Attorney General, Senator Jeff Sessions, is expected to get a rough ride when he appears before senators later on. Let's bring in the American journalist Beth Gardner to talk about this. Beth, a very good afternoon to you.
Hello.
On Jeff Sessions, I think I'm right in saying that back in the 1980s he was up for a federal judge's job. He didn't get it. For why?
Yes, that's right. He was appointed by Ronald Reagan back in the 80s for a judgeship. And there was a tremendous amount of concern about some allegedly or potentially racist comments that he had made, and perception that he had in his career up until then been an opponent of a number of civil rights measures, including voting rights. And he lost the opportunity for the judgeship for just that reason. This time around, he's seen as quite likely to be approved. He's a senator now. And despite sort of ideological differences and political differences, he seems to have pretty good personal relationships among his colleagues, or his soon-to-be former colleagues, who may be pretty inclined to support him, it seems. I think this sort of points to the fact that despite some of the great controversy that has been stirred and the great concern in many quarters by some of Trump's appointments and a sense of real ideological extremism, the Democrats really have very few levers now to try to stop them. The Republicans have full control not just of the White House shortly, but of the Senate as well. And we've seen a real turnaround where the Republican leadership in the Senate, which during the Obama years really made an art form out of sort of foot dragging and delay of nominations, taking weeks, if not months, over even the sort of most routine nominations, now is hurrying things through and scheduling scheduling nomination hearings even before FBI background checks and ethics checks have been completed on some of these nominees.
So given just given that changed arithmetic, we're likely just to see what? A bit of showboating, maybe?
I think the Democrats hope that there may be a few nominations where they'll be able to peel off a few Republicans and try to win the support they need to stop the nominations. It is a matter of routine that most president's cabinet nominations are approved, particularly when they have the Senate majority. I think the one that is, has aroused the most concern among at least a few Republicans who may switch sides is the nomination of Rex Tillerson to be Secretary of State. Obviously, the head of Exxon, an enormous oil company, fossil fuel company, has raised great concerns among those who worry about climate change, but potentially with more likelihood to flip Republican support is his ties to Russia. Tillerson has done a great deal of business there as the head of Exxon. Won Russia's highest award given to him just a year or two ago by Vladimir Putin, advocated that the sanctions on Russia, which were imposed because of its incursions into Crimea, be lifted. So that's raised some eyebrows among Republicans, and we'll have to see what happens.
But as you say, some pretty serious scrutiny in store for Tillerson. What about the men in uniform? There's a sort of martial flavour, Beth, isn't there, to a lot of the appointments? I mean, people like James Mattis, because they've served their country, because they've, at least theoretically put their lives on the line in service of the country, will politicians go easier on them?
Well, they may, and there's been some criticism from the Democrats that Trump has surrounded himself with a lot of generals, that he likes sort of strongmen. I think the truth is that that's not so unusual. Obama had various generals in different positions as well. James Mattis, General Mattis, Mad Dog is his nickname, as you said, has drawn some scrutiny because as the head of the Defense Department, traditionally that is a situation where we've had a tradition of civilian control over the military. He will require a special waiver because he has only been, I think, 3 years out of the Marines. Normally, the requirement is 7 years. Funnily enough, despite the nickname of Mad Dog, General Mattis appears to be one of the sort of more moderate and, perhaps moderating influences on Trump. He certainly has used some fairly intemperate language in the past, I think, which has how he won his nickname, talking about having fun killing people in various theaters of conflict. But when it comes to policy, the reports are that he has actually tried to talk Trump out of his sort of interest in torture, telling him that waterboarding is not effective. He opposed the Iran deal when it was agreed, but he feels it would be counterproductive to try to rip it up now. He's also warned Trump off of this, sort of very worrying coziness with Putin. So in terms of policy, he may actually be a sort of a more moderate force, interestingly
thanks
enough.
ever so much. We're talking about America. Boris Johnson, the Foreign Secretary, has just been there meeting senior members of the Trump team. He's in the House of Commons. Foreign Affairs questions. Here he is.